I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of that sentence leaving his mouth. Everything, your home, the business, all financial assets, has been left to Serafina Elwood. For a second, I thought I misheard him. My ears rang. My heart. It just stopped. Not metaphorically. Literally, it felt like it skipped. My breath caught in my throat as if my body refused to process what the lawyer just said. Serafina squeezed my hand, her fingers cold and perfectly manicured. I could feel the fake tremble in her grip. She leaned in closer, eyes already welling up with those fragile, glassy tears that somehow never smudged her mascara. Lyra, I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with perfectly crafted heartbreak. Let me back up for a second. Serafina Elwood is my older sister, 3 years older to be exact. Stunning, successful, the type who walks into a room and makes it feel like a magazine cover. People love her, she knows it. She's been charming her way through life since we were kids. But to me, she was still my sister, my family, my safe person. At least I thought she was. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My tongue felt thick, heavy like it had turned to stone. The words were caught somewhere between confusion and rage, lodged in the back of my throat. I stared at Mr. Halden, the lawyer, expecting some kind of correction, some cruel joke followed by a more reasonable truth. But he only blinked slowly, looking down at the folder in front of him. That folder held my life, and it had just been handed over to my sister. The room was painfully still. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly sounded like it was roaring in my ears. I could hear the faint tick of the antique brass clock on the corner shelf, counting down the seconds of what had just become a completely different reality. My fingers twitched. I wanted to say something, to scream, to demand an explanation. But instead, I just sat there, frozen, hollowed out by disbelief. My body stiffened in the leather chair as if bracing for an impact that had already hit. How? Why? Those were the only words repeating in my head like a broken reel. Why Serafina? Why not me? Why everything? I looked over at her. Her bottom lip quivered like she was about to break down. Her hand brushed a tear off her cheek. It was a beautiful performance. I'll give her that. Oscar-worthy. But then, something flickered. For just a moment, just one fraction of a second, her eyes shifted, sharp, quick, calculated. She glanced at the will in Mr. Halden's hand, then at me, and then back to her weepy expression. Her gaze flicked back like a rubber band snapping into place. That was when I knew. She knew. The tears weren't shock. They were relief. She'd been waiting for this moment. I could hear my heartbeat now, loud, pounding in my ears. My nails dug into my palm. That's when I felt it, the envelope, still tucked safely inside my bag, the one Calum gave me just days before he died, wax sealed, his initials on the back, heavy with something I hadn't dared open, something I thought was just a formality, insurance paperwork, a note to say goodbye. But now, I remembered his eyes, the way they looked at me when he gave it to me. Sad, yes, but alert, intentional. Open this only if something doesn't feel right. His exact words, and nothing about this felt right. I loosened my grip on Serafina's hand and pulled it away slowly. She blinked at me, her head tilting slightly. Picture of hurt and concern, but I didn't match her expression. I didn't give her anything. I reached into my bag, fingers trembling slightly as they found the edges of the envelope. It was time. Time to hear the truth. Calum didn't trust anyone else to deliver. I stood up slowly. Mr. Halden raised his brows. Serafina's smile froze, just barely, like a mask slipping out of place. I placed the envelope on the polished oak table between us and said calmly, "There's something else." Something Calum wanted read, just in case. And in that moment, the room fell silent. To understand why that moment hit me so hard, why I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me when Serafina's name was read, you have to know what life looked like before the silence, before the will, before the envelope. Calum and I had been married for 10 years, 10 years of chaos and beauty, of designing a life, literally. We ran a boutique interior design firm together called Juniper and Brass. We built it from the ground up, laying tile samples on our kitchen floor at midnight and arguing over fabric textures like it was life or death. That business was more than income. It was our identity. And then came the diagnosis. It started with Calum forgetting things, tiny things, keys, a client's name. At first, we joked about it. We were just too busy, right? But then, one day, he forgot how to get home from the office. That was the day everything changed. Doctors confirmed it was a rare neurological disorder. Fast, unforgiving. There was no treatment, just time. And not much of it. I felt like I was drowning in slow motion. That's when Serafina swept in. She was always the one with answers. The oldest, the most composed, the one who somehow never let life touch her too roughly. She arrived the day Calum got his final diagnosis, heels clicking on the hospital floor, her black coat still dusted with snow. She hugged me like I was fragile glass and said, "You don't have to do this alone, Lyra." I'm here now. And she was, constantly. She took over managing the appointments, organizing the medications, even helping with our clients, just to keep things afloat. Everyone praised her. Friends, nurses, even Kylam. "You're lucky to have a sister like her," they all said, and for a while I believed them. But there were things, small things, the kind you dismiss when you're exhausted and scared, like how Kylam would stop talking the moment I entered a room, or how Serafina always seemed to have his phone, answering calls, replying to texts, like some efficient executive assistant I never hired. I remember one night walking past Kalam's study and hearing their voices, low, fast, urgent. When I stepped in, they both stopped. Serafina smiled that wide, sugar-sweet smile and said, "We were just figuring out how to update the business contracts." Something about her tone didn't sit right, but I was too tired to push it. And Kylam, he looked guilty, not panicked, not scared, just guilty. I brushed it off. My husband was dying, my sister was helping. Why was I being so paranoid? But paranoia is just instinct we haven't learned how to explain yet. In those final days, Calum barely spoke, but one evening, he called me into his room. His voice was rough, barely there. His fingers trembled as he handed me a thick, sealed envelope with his initials in wax. "Lyra," he said, eyes locked to mine, "open this only if something doesn't feel right." I held it in both hands, the paper warm from his touch. I wanted to ask what it meant, but his eyelids fluttered shut before I could. And then he slept. And then he never really woke again. After he passed, I tucked the envelope away. I couldn't bear to open it. I thought it was a goodbye letter, a list of passwords, a gesture of love I'd get to someday when I could read his words without breaking. But then Serafina's name was read, and suddenly, everything felt wrong. A week after Calum's funeral, I found myself standing outside Mr. Halden's office, staring at the old brass plaque on his door like it was written in another language. My stomach was twisting. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Couldn't. My whole body felt hollow, like grief had chewed me up and spat out a ghost wearing my skin. The office was quiet, warm, too warm, the kind of warm that makes your skin itch under your clothes. I sat down on the edge of the leather chair and tried not to breathe too loud. Serafina sat beside me, all black silk and perfect posture. She looked like she'd stepped out of a morning fashion catalog, a tasteful pearl brooch, a single teardrop earring. Of course she cried. Soft, dabbing tears with a linen handkerchief. Not the kind of crying that leaves you gasping and red-eyed like me at the funeral, but the kind that draws sympathy, admiration, attention. She patted my knee. Her voice was hushed. "Whatever he left behind, Lyra, it was yours first. You know that, right?" I just nodded, even though her words felt like ice down my spine. Mr. Halden walked in, his presence instantly commanding. He was a tall man, broad shoulders, kind eyes. Calum trusted him, so I did too. He sat behind the polished desk and opened a thick folder with our names on it. Mine, Calum's, Serafina's. He cleared his throat. Per Calum Thorne's final will and testament, the entirety of his estate, including real estate, business assets, and financial accounts, will be transferred to Serafina Elwood. That moment, I can't describe it properly. It was like the air was sucked out of the room. My ears rang, my vision tunneled. I swear the walls got smaller. I blinked. Once, twice. Serafina let out a soft gasp, like she was as shocked as I was. She reached for my hand, clasping it tightly. Lyra. I had no idea. I would never... Her voice broke like glass, and for a moment I almost believed her. But then I looked at her face, and I saw it. That flicker. That half second where her eyes darted to the folder in Mr. Halden's hands, then back to me, like she needed to check if I bought it, if I was still playing my part as the grieving, clueless sister. And just like that, everything shifted. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, perfectly still. But inside, my thoughts were racing so fast they collided with each other. How could Calum do this to me? Why her? What am I missing? Then I remembered. The envelope. I could practically feel it through the fabric of my handbag, tucked safely in the side pocket where I hadn't dared touch it since the day he gave it to me. Calum's words whispered through my memory like a slow echo. Open this. Only if something doesn't feel right. Well, nothing felt right. I stood up so slowly the chair barely creaked beneath me. Mr. Halden paused mid-sentence. Serafina blinked up at me, her expression still frozen in its carefully constructed grief. I reached into my bag and felt the thick edges of the envelope, the wax seal still perfectly intact. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden certainty that everything was about to change. Mr. Halden, I said quietly, there's something else Calum left. Something he said to bring if things didn't feel right. I laid it down gently on the table right in front of him. Serafina didn't move, and that's when I realized she already knew exactly what was in it. The envelope was heavier than I remembered. It rested on the center of the table like a stone, sealed with deep red wax. Calum's initials, CT, still pressed perfectly into the surface. I couldn't stop staring at it. That seal had felt like a symbol of love when he first gave it to me. But now, it pulsed with something deeper, something ominous. Mr. Halden adjusted his glasses. His expression shifted from mild confusion to focused concern as he reached for it. Where did this come from? He asked, gently turning it over in his hands. I swallowed hard. My voice was low, but steady. Calum gave it to me 3 days before he passed. He said, only open it if something didn't feel right after he was gone. Serafina let out a soft breath, almost like a scoff, too quiet to call out, but loud enough that I heard it. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. If I did, I might lose the calm I was clinging to by a thread. Mr. Halden carefully broke the seal, the wax cracking with a soft snap that made my entire body tense. He pulled out several sheets, legal stationery and a handwritten note clipped on top. His eyes scanned the paper. His eyebrows began to slowly draw together. He didn't speak right away. He just read. The room felt colder suddenly, though I could see sunlight through the blinds. My palms were damp, my chest tight. I could hear every tick of that damn brass clock in the corner, like it was counting down to some invisible explosion. What is it, Calum? What did you leave me? Finally, Mr. Halden cleared his throat. He looked up at me, and there was something new in his expression, something that hadn't been there before. Respect, and something else, concern. Lyra, this document is legally binding, he said slowly. It's a notarized codicil. Direct amendment to Calum's previous will. It overrides the original. I blinked. Overrides? Serafina stiffened beside me. What do you mean, overrides? She asked quickly, the softness evaporating from her voice like mist burning off in the sun. Mr. Halden lifted the handwritten page. This is Calum's final letter, and I'm instructed to read it aloud in the presence of both parties. He paused, looked between us. I nodded. Serafina didn't, but he began anyway. To Lyra, my wife, if you're hearing this, then something happened that I feared might. I'm sorry. I've failed in more ways than you'll ever know, and this letter is part of my attempt to set things right. My lungs tightened. The room was fading around me. All I could hear was Calum's voice in my head, as if he were standing behind me. Mr. Halden continued, Months before my diagnosis, I made a terrible mistake. I was vulnerable, confused, and in that moment of weakness, I trusted the wrong person, someone I never imagined would use my illness for their own benefit. My stomach turned. Serafina's nails tapped against her armrest. She wasn't crying now. Mr. Halden didn't stop. Serafina convinced me to sign a new will, assuring me it was temporary. She said she was protecting you, but I realized, too late, that she was positioning herself to take everything. There it was. The truth, laid bare. Mr. Halden looked up from the letter, almost apologetic. This codicil reverses the estate transfer. Calum left everything to you, Lyra. The house, the business, the savings. It's all yours. Serafina's chair creaked as she leaned forward, voice sharp like broken glass. That's not possible. You're not seriously accepting that over a signed will. But Mr. Halden cut her off, calm and unwavering. This document is dated, witnessed, and notarized. It holds up. Serafina's face shifted. No more sadness, no confusion, just rage, quiet and simmering. But I didn't look away this time. I met her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw her clearly. The silence that followed Mr. Halden's words wasn't just quiet. It was dead, still. Like the room itself was holding its breath. Serafina didn't speak, not right away. Her expression had frozen somewhere between disbelief and fury. The hand that once clutched mine so tenderly now gripped the edge of her armrest, knuckles white. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My eyes were locked on hers, and for the first time, I didn't look away. Because I knew. Every suspicion, every uneasy glance, every night I'd tossed and turned, wondering if grief was making me paranoid. This moment proved it all. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. Mr. Halden placed the envelope and its contents beside the folder that once held the original will, now null. Useless. A puppet document written under manipulation. He cleared his throat softly, looking toward Serafina. If you have any objections, Ms. Elwood, you'll need to file them formally. But I'll be honest with you, this document is ironclad. Your window to contest it is slim, and Calum left a very detailed trail. Serafina laughed. Once. Sharp. Bitter. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. You're really going to take the word of a dying man over a legal document signed weeks earlier? I turned to her slowly. You mean the one you pressured him into signing while he could barely think straight? The one you helped him draft while I was out filling prescriptions? Her eyes snapped to mine. There it was. That flash like lightning. All pretense gone. You don't understand what he wanted, she said, her voice lower now, colder. He was scared. He needed someone who could take control, who actually had vision. You were falling apart. He was my husband, I cut in. My voice didn't waver, though my chest was pounding. And I was your sister, she fired back. I was doing what neither of you could do, protecting what he built. Mr. Halden's pen clicked softly as he closed the file in front of him. Regardless of your motives, Ms. Elwood, Coylum made his final decision, legally, authentically, and with absolute clarity. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. Her breathing had changed, shallow, clipped. I saw the truth in her then, plain and unfiltered. She had never come to help. She had come to take. Coylum had been her opportunity, and for a while, she'd won. Until he saw her for who she was, until he remembered who he was, who we were. And now, he had spoken. From beyond the grave, through ink and parchment, with more clarity than he'd ever had while alive. It wasn't about the money, or even the business. It was about trust, about truth, about giving me something no one else had since the moment he died, a voice. Serafina didn't say goodbye. She just left, coat over her arm, heels echoing in the corridor like a warning shot fading into silence. I sat there for a moment after she was gone. My body finally released the tension it had been holding for days, maybe weeks. I looked at Mr. Halden, who gave me a small, almost sympathetic nod. He meant for you to have this, he said gently. I nodded. I couldn't speak just yet. My throat was tight, but not from grief. It was something else now, something I hadn't felt since Calum got sick. Strength. Not the loud kind, the earned kind. the kind that's built through fire, forged through betrayal, and sealed with truth. I gathered the envelope and the amended will, my fingers brushing Caleb's signature. One final act of love, one last safeguard, and I thought to myself, he knew. He knew her. He knew me. And even in the end, he chose me. It's strange how silence changes once the storm passes. That room, where minutes before my world had tilted and nearly cracked in half, was now calm, not just quiet but peaceful. I could finally breathe, deeply, without the weight of doubt sitting on my chest. The letter, the envelope, the truth Caleb left behind. It didn't just change the legal outcome, it changed me. For days after, I kept the envelope on my nightstand. I'd catch myself staring at it before falling asleep, not because I needed to reread it, but because it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time, that he believed in me. Caleb made mistakes. I don't deny that. He let Serafina in too far. He ignored things he shouldn't have. And yes, he betrayed me once. I won't sugarcoat that. But in the end, when he had nothing left but clarity and time, he gave me something so much bigger than any apology. He gave me truth. He gave me choice. And he gave me protection in the only way he still could. The days that followed weren't clean or easy. Serafina sent me one message, a cold, clipped voice note saying she wouldn't forget this. I never replied. I didn't need to. She had taken her shot, and she lost. Not because I beat her, but because Caleb chose to see her clearly just once, and that was enough to undo everything she'd built. I took time off from the business after that. I needed to. I needed to find out who I was without him, without her, without the chaos. For the first time in years, it was quiet. No one making decisions for me. No one managing me. No one smiling with hidden knives in their hands. It was terrifying and freeing. I started slow, organizing files, repainting the office, updating the logo. I changed the name from Juniper and Brass to Lyra Studio. Simple, honest, mine. I found new clients. I reconnected with old ones. I started saying no more often, especially to people who smiled like Serafina. And somewhere in that rebuilding, I found something I didn't expect to discover again. Joy. Not the loud kind, not the movie scene kind, but the kind that creeps in while you're making coffee in a quiet kitchen, or when you finally sleep through the night without waking from grief, or when you laugh at something dumb on TV and realize you're not faking it anymore. That kind. People ask me sometimes if I forgave Caleb. I tell them the truth. I don't think forgiveness is always loud or pretty. Sometimes it looks like setting the weight down and walking forward anyway. I may never fully understand the choices he made when he was scared, but I will always remember what he chose when he was clear. He chose to leave me the truth, not a house, not a bank account, not a company, the truth. And that's worth everything. Because when the people you love are gone, what they leave behind becomes your story to carry. And I'm done carrying anyone else's version but my own. So if you're watching this and your gut is whispering, something doesn't feel right, listen to it. I ignored mine for too long. Don't wait for a sealed envelope to open your eyes. Sometimes the love you need is the truth they were too afraid to say while they were still here. If you made it this far, thank you, truly, for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but some truths are too important to keep buried. If this resonated with you, even a little, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too. And if you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it, just know you're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more real stories like this, raw, messy, honest, and remember, sometimes closure doesn't come in conversation. Sometimes it comes sealed in an envelope, waiting for the moment you're finally ready to open it. Take care of your heart and trust your gut. I'll see you in the next one. The lawyer didn't even say my name, just skipped over it like I didn't exist. That was the moment I realized I didn't just lose my father, I lost the last piece of hope I had left. I sat there, silent, tense, on the edge of a stiff leather chair in that polished law office, pretending like my heart wasn't about to burst out of my chest. The air smelled of cologne, old paper, and expensive wood polish, but none of it masked the discomfort crawling across my skin. My older brother, Jake, leaned back in his seat, legs stretched out, grinning like he already knew what the will said. He probably did. He was always Dad's shadow, the one who followed the rules, went corporate, wore his success like a badge of honor. To his left sat my sister, Brianna, perfect, poised, entitled. She didn't even glance at me. Her legs were crossed, purse in her lap, fingers lazily tapping against the leather armrest. That signature smirk on her face, it wasn't new. Jake and Brianna weren't just siblings, they were the favorites. And me, I was always the afterthought. Mr. Harris, our family lawyer, adjusted his glasses and opened the file. His voice was steady, neutral, but my ears were buzzing so loud it was hard to hear the words. Per the last will and testament of Thomas Miller. Jake gets the house. Brianna gets the investment accounts. Then silence. I felt it. The pause. The awkward one that comes before bad news. Mr. Harris cleared his throat and unfolded a smaller envelope. There's a personal note for Nora. He read it aloud. To my daughter, Nora. You never amounted to much. That was it. No money, no memento. Not even a photograph. Just 7 words. 7 brutal, final words. My stomach dropped. I felt the blood rush from my face. My body went cold. Jake didn't even try to hide his chuckle. Brianna leaned toward him and whispered something, her hand covering her mouth, but her eyes flicked toward me, amused, mocking. My cheeks burned, but I didn't let them see the tears forming. I forced my face still, expressionless. Inside, I was crumbling. Was that really all I was to him? After everything? I thought of the times I'd shown up despite being ignored, the times I'd helped, supported, waited for a sliver of approval. I thought of the nights I stayed on the phone with him when no one else bothered to call. And this was how he said goodbye? I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped across the floor, sharp and jarring. I stood up, calmly, quietly. Every nerve in my body screamed to yell, cry, do something, but I didn't. I nodded once at Mr. Harris, didn't say a word to Jake or Brianna, and I walked out, not just from the room, from the lies, the hierarchy, the silent rules I was never allowed to question. As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face, and the tears I'd been holding back finally welled up, but I didn't let them fall. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me to begin with. I wasn't angry, not yet, but something inside me whispered, this isn't over. 3 months later, I would walk back into their lives, and I'd be the one holding the power. People always said I looked like my dad. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same sarcastic half-smile when something annoyed us. But somehow, I was the only one he couldn't seem to love. Growing up, I was the youngest, and for a while, I thought that meant something special. I thought I'd get the extra hugs, the gentle talks, the protective hand on my shoulder. But I learned quickly that in the Miller house, love was transactional. Jake, the oldest, was practically a clone of Dad. Sports, straight A's, internships by 17. He was the blueprint, the one who did everything right. Brianna was the polished one, homecoming queen, college honors, married rich by 25. She was Dad's bright star. He said that once at a dinner party, right in front of me. I remember laughing like it didn't sting. And me? I was the one who colored outside the lines. I studied art, not accounting. I worked with nonprofits, not firms. I freelanced, painted, took on random design gigs, whatever paid the bills. Dad never said it directly, but I knew what he thought of my life. Temporary, unimpressive, software. He used to say things like, when are you going to get a real job? Or, you're not still doing that artsy stuff, are you? Sometimes I'd lie just to make the conversation easier. Tell him I was applying for office jobs, that I was looking at corporate options. His face would finally relax when I said things like that, like he was relieved I might become someone he could understand. But I never wanted that life, not for me. Still, I tried. God, I tried. I showed up for birthdays. I called on holidays. I was always the one who cleaned up after dinner while Brianna scrolled on her phone and Jake disappeared into the den. And even though I was barely acknowledged, I held on to this ridiculous hope that one day he'd notice. that maybe he'd finally say, "I'm proud of you, Nora." But now, I knew that day would never come. After the will reading, I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove around for hours with no music, no destination. Just me, the hum of the tires, and this ache in my chest that wouldn't let go. It felt like grief, but not just for my father. Grief for all the years I wasted trying to matter to people who had already decided I didn't. At some point, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, staring out at nothing. My phone buzzed a few times, probably texts from Brianna or Jake, pretending to check in just to keep appearances. I didn't answer. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, eyes puffy, lips pressed tight. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I whispered, "You're stronger than this." But even my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. That was the night I realized I had nothing left to prove. Not to my dad, not to my siblings, and definitely not to myself. I wasn't angry yet, but something deeper had started to form in the silence. Not rage, not revenge, just a stillness. And buried inside it, something sharp, a shift I couldn't explain. Something was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. The days after the will reading were hollow. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. But something in me had gone quiet, like a light had been shut off inside my chest. I moved through the world like I was on autopilot, brushing my teeth, watering the plants, answering emails with that same empty smile I'd perfected for family dinners. I didn't talk about the letter, not to friends, not even to myself. I just kept hearing the words, "You never amounted to much," over and over, and not just hearing them, feeling them. Like they were branded across my skin, reminding me with every step that I didn't belong in my own bloodline. Jake didn't even follow up after the reading, not a single message, no gloating necessary. He already had everything he wanted. Brianna sent a one-line text, "Hope you're okay." I left it on read. I think part of me kept waiting to wake up, to realize it was all just some terrible misunderstanding, that I'd find a voicemail from Dad explaining everything, that Mr. Harris had mixed up the paperwork, but nothing came. I spent a lot of time walking around the apartment barefoot, trying to keep myself grounded. The wood floors were cold, the kind of cold that crept up through your soles and reminded you, you're still here. You still have to stand up. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat at my desk trying to force myself to work, some minor rebranding job for a local cafe, but I couldn't focus. My hands hovered over the keyboard, unmoving. That's when I remembered something Mr. Harris said, almost offhandedly. "Your father left you access to the storage unit off I-89, probably just old tax records, but you're listed as the sole contact now." At the time, it felt like a consolation prize. Now, it felt like a breadcrumb. I grabbed my keys without thinking, threw on a hoodie, drove with the windows down, air whipping my face like I needed to wake myself up. The place was exactly how I remembered it. Gray metal doors, humming fluorescent lights, the faint smell of rubber and concrete. The manager barely looked up as he slid the clipboard across the counter. One signature later, I was standing in front of Unit 14B, key trembling slightly in my hand. When I rolled the door up, the overhead light flickered once, then buzzed to life. It was packed. Old furniture, stacked boxes, a dusty coat rack I remembered from the foyer when I was 12. It looked like time had folded itself into this tiny room. Most of the boxes were labeled with Dad's usual handwriting: invoices, receipts, tools, photos. I almost turned around, but something caught my eye. A box near the back, smaller, neater, labeled in red ink, "Private Legal." My breath hitched. I don't know why, but my heart started racing. My hands felt clammy. There was nothing particularly dramatic about it, but my gut told me this mattered. I crawled across the clutter, knees pressing into old rugs and cracked boxes, until I reached it. The cardboard felt oddly warm, familiar even. I opened the lid. Inside, a single sealed envelope, yellowed, worn, and on the front, in that unmistakable handwriting, Nora Elise Miller. My full name. No jokes, no cruelty. Just my name. I held it like it was a heartbeat, and for the first time since the will reading, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I held the envelope in both hands like it was made of glass. It felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, but in meaning, in weight, my full name, in his handwriting. Not a nickname, not a cruel joke, just Nora Elise Miller. There was something sacred about that. Strange, after everything. Like maybe this envelope had been sealed before all the resentment, before the silence, before the final 7 words he left behind. I sat down right there on the dusty floor of the unit, legs folded beneath me, the buzzing of the overhead light the only sound in the world. My fingers trembled as I peeled the flap open. Inside was a folded document, several pages thick, clipped together with an old brass fastener. The first page made my stomach drop. Property transfer agreement. I read it again, slower this time. He had transferred the deed to the house, Dad's house, the house Jake now claimed as his own, directly to me. Not just the house, the land it sat on, the outbuilding behind it, the small patch of commercial property attached to the side yard, all of it. My name, my signature, in blue ink, Dad's signature, in black. 2 witnesses, notarized, filed, 3 months before he died. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to breathe. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some rough draft or unfiled will. This was real. This was legal. This was mine. The house that Jake moved into. The land Brianna was planning to develop. All of it. Mine. I sank back against the cold metal wall, stunned, confused. 100 thoughts raced through my mind like wildfire. Why didn't he say anything? Why hide it? And then another thought crept in, one that planted itself like a seed and wouldn't let go. Maybe that letter wasn't the whole truth. Maybe that wasn't all he meant to leave behind. Maybe somewhere, beneath all the disappointment and silence, my father had seen something in me they didn't, something worth trusting. Because what he left in this envelope wasn't an insult, it was power. And now I had a choice. I could confront Jake and Brianna, tell them the truth, demand what was mine, or I could wait, quietly, patiently. Let them celebrate a victory that wasn't theirs. Let them brag and plan and redecorate, completely unaware that the ground beneath their feet, literally, no longer belonged to them. And then, when the moment was right, pull the rug out from under them. The thought made my lips curl into a smile I hadn't felt in weeks. Not bitter, not loud, just controlled, intentional, satisfying. For once, I wouldn't be the one begging to be seen. I'd be the one holding the paperwork, the facts, the deed. And when I walked back into that house, they'd have no idea what was coming. 3 months. I waited 3 whole months. Not because I was unsure, not because I was scared, because I wanted them to settle in, get comfortable, decorate, renovate. Post their little new chapter family selfies on the porch I used to sweep every Sunday. I wanted them to believe they'd won, and they did. Jake moved into Dad's old office and turned it into a cigar lounge. Brianna knocked down a wall in the dining room and started planning to convert the backyard into an outdoor bar space for her summer events. It was like watching strangers play house with something that didn't belong to them. Only, it did belong to me. Every brick, every window, every square inch of soil in the backyard. Mine. The morning I returned, the sky was perfectly blue, clean, sharp. The kind of morning that looks innocent but has something brewing underneath. I pulled into the driveway like I owned the place. Because I did. Jake's truck was parked where Dad's used to be. Brianna's Range Rover was halfway on the grass. I straightened my jacket, tucked the deed folder under my arm, and walked up the path like I wasn't the same girl who had walked away in silence 3 months ago. This time, I had a voice and paperwork. Brianna opened the door before I could even knock. She looked surprised, but not in a worried way. More like I was a solicitor she didn't want to deal with. Nora? She blinked. What are you doing here? I smiled politely. Is Jake home? She hesitated, clearly confused. He's inside. Why? Because I'm going to need both of you to sit down. Her eyebrows pulled together. Excuse me. I stepped past her into the foyer. Jake was on the couch, phone in hand, feet up on the coffee table like he owned the world. When he saw me, he raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I said, dropping the folder on the table in front of him. I figured you'd say that. He glanced at it. What is this? I didn't answer. I just sat across from him as Brianna came around the couch and leaned over his shoulder. She started reading first, then he did. Their faces changed almost in sync, brows furrowed, eyes narrowed, and then silence. Jake flipped through the papers like he was trying to find a loophole, a misprint, something, but there was nothing. Notarized, filed, legal. Their smirks vanished. You're lying, Brianna said softly, but there was no conviction in her voice. No, I said calmly. I'm not. Jake tossed the folder onto the table like it burned him. This can't be real. It's real, I said, and legally binding. Silence again. Then I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You've got 30 days to vacate the property. My lawyers already filed the paperwork with the county. You'll get the official notice next week. Brianna looked pale. Jake looked like he wanted to throw something, but I didn't give them the satisfaction. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. No yelling, no drama, just power. Before stepping outside, I turned back and said, "Oh, and just so you know, Dad did leave me something." Jake raised his eyes. I smiled. Everything. The house is quiet now. No heels clicking on tile. No arrogant laughter bouncing off the walls. No condescending voices filling the kitchen like noise pollution. Just quiet. And it's beautiful. I sit in the same chair my father used to read in, looking out the bay window at the front yard. The leaves have started to turn. Reds, golds, a little orange where the sun hits just right. It's peaceful in a way I never got to experience growing up in this place. Back then, peace was a thing reserved for everyone else. Not anymore. It's been 3 weeks since Jake and Brianna moved out. They didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect them to. The last time we spoke was in that living room, when I told them they had 30 days to leave. They left in 21. And honestly, I don't feel bad. For years, I lived under the weight of their judgment. Their smirks, their subtle jabs. I thought if I worked harder, proved myself, earned their approval, maybe then I'd finally be accepted. But now, I've stopped needing what they never intended to give. And Dad? I think about him more than I expected to. Some days, I still feel the sting of that letter. You never amounted to much. It hits harder than I'd like to admit. But when I found that deed, when I saw my name on something he chose to leave only to me, I realized something. Maybe that letter wasn't his final word. Maybe it was the mask he wore till the very end. The father who couldn't quite say, "I love you," but could quietly sign over everything he owned to the daughter he never said it to. Maybe that was his apology. Or maybe it was his way of admitting he was wrong. I don't know. I probably never will. But what I do know is this. I didn't need an inheritance to prove I had value. I didn't need their approval to know I mattered. And I didn't need a single cent to earn my peace. Still, having the deed to this house, having the land they all thought belonged to them, that was justice. But what came after was healing. I kept Dad's reading chair, his record player, some old photos from the storage unit, the ones where I'm actually smiling. I painted the living room the shade of blue he always said was too bold. I hung up my own artwork in the hallway. I turned the old garage into a studio, and for the first time in years, I wake up excited to work again. Not for validation, but because it's mine. My life. Space. My story. People say revenge is sweet, but honestly, peace is sweeter. Some people fight for revenge. I didn't have to. I just waited and let the truth do the talking. If this story hit you somewhere deep, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it too. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and stick around.